thank you for doing this.
Uh-huh.
If you wouldn't mind, give me your name, your title, and your responsibilities.
So my name is Colleen Sellers. I'm the Group Brand Director at Johnson & Johnson, and I manage the OTC allergy portfolio, so Zyrtec and Benadryl.
Well, congrats on the
Thank
Effie that you
you.
won. It's for Muddle No More,
Right.
So tell me a little bit about the inspiration behind that campaign.
Sure. So Muddle No More is our campaign for our Zyrtec brand of allergy products. When we were looking at positioning the brand and coming out with a new campaign in the summer of 2011, we went and talked to consumers. And one of the things that we realized as we were talking to them is they felt like a lot of the products in the space weren't talking to them because they pictured people running through fields of flowers and being happy about their allergies and not being authentic about how hard it is sometimes to have allergies. So we took a bit of a departure and formed a consumer insight about the fact that when you have allergies, sometimes you muddle through them. And we found humorous ways to show them muddling. So that became the Muddle No More campaign.
That's great. So an Effie is about effectiveness, marketing effectiveness. How do you think about marketing effectiveness? How would you define it?
Sure. So I think the most basic way of defining effectiveness is through sales. So have you seen sales increase? Have you seen your market share improve? Which both things we have. I think the other way you can think about it is how do your consumers relate to you? Do consumers feel like you're talking more authentically to them, that they're more part of the conversation with you? Do they feel like you get them? And so one of our key metrics actually on the Zyrtec brand is trying to see improvement in the brand being the brand that gets them versus just a brand that they buy.
So putting together a campaign like that and coordinating that, you've got partners involved.
Sure.
Tell me a little bit about you as the client side, but also your agency partners, and how did that all come together?
Great. So we have been with JWT New York for the whole life of Zyrtec. So Zyrtec is a fairly young brand, and they have been our agency for the whole time with a pretty consistent team on it. When we were looking to come up with a new campaign for Zyrtec, it was done very jointly with them. So we went and the strategic planners as well as account and creative came with our marketers and our global insight partners at J&J to really delve into the consumer insights to find a new way to position and talk to consumers. So we have an amazing relationship. I think that sometimes you can't always tell who's the client and who's the agency, which is probably the best way and a really good sign that you're working very well together. So we partnered for a good 6 months in trying to find the right consumer insights to talk about. And then as we built the campaign, we brought in our other agency partners our PR agency, Hunter, or our J3, our media buying agency, to really make sure that we were using the insights across all of the different channels and think of ways that we could make sure that we're always talking to the consumer in the right way.
So you've reached a level of success in your career. Tell me a little bit, is there something special that fuels you, or how do you get inspired every day?
Yeah, so I think a couple of things inspire me, and both actually are people. So my consumers really inspire me. I love getting to understand them more and really diving deep into the consumer insights. I think that in fact, we make people's lives better every day because allergies can be a real pain in the neck. And so it's really wonderful to be able to improve someone's life and get that feedback. So that inspires me, as well as honestly the people on my team, both on my team at Johnson & Johnson, as well as my agency partners. We have really an incredible partnership across and watching them grow and learn and become even better marketers is a truly inspiring part of my job.
Well, as an allergy sufferer, I'm glad somebody like you is out there working on my behalf. One of the things we were surprised by is that you were our first female of the day, and actually the only female interviewed today.
Oh.
What is that? What do you think that says? Or does it say anything at all?
So, I don't know. It's interesting because where I work at Johnson & Johnson, there are a lot of female leaders, and we're actually over 50% female in my group. So it is a little surprising to me. I was surprised, and my agency teams have a lot of women on them. So it was kind of surprising, not in a good way, right? And so I don't know if it is, kind of which of the winners got chosen. But I think it's a sign that we need to make sure that we're continuing to support our women leaders. And also, I think, make sure that we're telling people that this is part of success, is coming to be part of these interviews, and really making sure that you're championing your brands across, all the different channels. So not just when you're creating the TV commercials and the digital programs, but really all of it. Right. I don't know. It's kind of...
it was disturbing,
It's disturbing. I think it is a little disturbing. And I think, part of me is like, well, maybe they were, juggling a lot of things. Yeah. It's June. It's the end of school. I know I was at a school function this morning in Philadelphia and hopped on the train to be here. So sometimes the juggling just makes it hard to do these things. But it is a little...
Do you have any suggestions or tips for people that may be in your shoes in the future?
Yeah, I think for women especially, it is hard to, you have a lot of times in your life, especially when you have children. So you take a little while off and you come back, and it becomes a time of adjustment. And as we all know, change is hard, and it's hard to adjust back and forth. And I think naturally, because women do leave to have maternity leaves, coming back to that is another adjustment phase. And I think giving yourself time to adjust and learning to do things differently and knowing it's okay to do things differently than you did before. I don't know if we talk about that enough. As a culture, I don't know if we talk up to our younger leaders who are just coming and having babies, that it's okay that it's difficult and that we need to support each other in it. I actually, a couple weeks ago, one of the girls who doesn't work directly for me, but she works with me, she came to me and she said, oh my God, how do I do this? And I was like, well, first of all, you start by not making sure everything has to be perfect. And, I think for a lot of us who have been driven to success, perfection and being a perfectionist is part of that drive, or part of that reason you're successful. And once you're a working mom or a working dad, right? This goes for dads too. Not everything can be perfect anymore. And so you have to, right? You have to pick what's going to be perfect. And then you have to decide, well, this doesn't actually need to be perfect. This just needs to be good enough. And learning that's a process. And the more senior you get and the more experience you get, the better you get at making the choices. Sometimes you don't make the right choice, right? And I think that's really important. I know one of your questions is about what would you change? And so we've done a lot of digital work on Zyrtec and on Benadryl. And one of the big learnings there is that nothing is perfect, right? And you can think an idea is really good and put it into the digital or social space, and it actually doesn't do very well. And the ideas that do really well, you're sometimes really surprised by. That was like the one-off post or the one-off tweet. And you're like, oh, this had a lot of legs. This is great. And so learning to put stuff out there and get a response and then learn from that response, I think is part of being a good marketer and, in the current environment that we live in. I think that goes for our personal lives too and our work lives. So I think learning to not be perfect in everything you do, but put yourself out there. Right. So come for the interview is a really important thing.
I think that's a great advice. Advice.
Thank you.
So stepping back from Johnson & Johnson and Zyrtec, let's think about other brands. And, are there brands that you follow or that you personally are passionate about? And, I'm being a brand marketer. Sure. I'm sure you're watching some.
Yeah. So I think that's really, of course, there are brands that I love, and there are brands I'm incredibly loyal to also. I think that what's been most interesting in the past couple of years is thinking about brands. So I'm a CPG marketer, really classically trained, boxes on shelves, and our retailers. I think one of the interesting things that's happened in this space is thinking about brands beyond CPG brands and really thinking about how they're doing things well and how they're promoting whatever it is they're selling. So one of the things, Scandal, the TV show Scandal. Right? Yeah. They have, that's a brand.
It's a personal favorite.
Yeah. So, I've been watching that show since it aired because I'm a Shonda Rhimes fan. So I started watching it. And I think one of the most interesting things about that show is if you think about it as a brand and if you think about it, how well they've done social media, right? They have incredible social media followership. And it really is incredibly organic, but also driven in some ways by the stars in a very authentic way. And then, though, their person, like Kerry Washington's character on that show, has a very specific brand, right? Olivia Pope has certain clothes she wears. She has a style. She has sayings. And so if you think about that and how they've been able to do that creatively and take those lessons and put it onto your CPG brand, there's so many great lessons to be learned there.
Right.
Another one that we were talking about recently was Uber. Mm-hmm. So again, like not in our CPG space, right? But how incredible is it that they have been able to become such a part of people's lives in a very short amount of time? And you can now, wherever you are traveling, so we travel a lot for work, you can use the same app and find someone and you don't even know where you are sometimes, right? We were in the middle of Dallas a couple weeks ago. We had no idea where we were, but Uber knew where we were. And they were able to pick us up and take us back to our hotel. And depending on which city you're in, they actually provide different services, which is also such an important part of marketing today, is having really the customized product or service or communication for each of your consumers.
What do you think is the most important marketing trend or opportunity today?
So I think in general, one of the most important things is that your consumers want and demand a conversation with you at all times. So they demand engagement. And if we're kind of trained, classical marketing is a little bit, I'm going to push a message out there and hope they respond. But I'm not always sure what that response is. And I watch these trends, like what is effectiveness? Is it sales? Is it market share? That's how we were trained. Really now, marketing has become, we're going to put something out there and you're going to respond to us whether or not we like it, whether or not we're expecting it. And we need to be able to respond to you. And that is going to create, that conversation is ultimately going to create either the loyalty or disloyalty. It's going to create the purchase and the repeat. And that's a much harder thing to do because it's not static. You can't go out and test it, right? You can't test your messages like you used to be able to. And so to me, that's one of the bigger trends. And it's not, I think for a long time, people were like, oh, it's all social or it's all digital. But that's actually true of TV commercials too now. So everything has to be part of a conversation.
One of the popular press is, if you read it, and some folks think that digital, you mentioned digital may take over our lives. We'll be no longer brand marketers, we'll be digital marketers. Right. How do you feel about that?
So
that hypothesis?
I think it as marketers, at the end of the day, to be good marketers, it's about our consumer insights. And it's about talking to our consumers about what matters to them. And it doesn't really matter which channel you're in. So to be good at it, you have to be in the channels where they're listening to you. And sometimes that is TV or print. But I think that possibly digital changes how we actually use that medium and how the communications look and feel in that medium. I mean, I think digital is a huge part of our plans. I mean, if it's not, you're in trouble. But it's not as easy as saying everything has to be digital. I mean, it still has to be a really good idea, right? Right. And it still has to be based on fundamental consumer insights, else it doesn't matter where you put it.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. And insight in particular is big for you, it sounds like. So as you think about research as a component of how you understand and uncover those insights, are there any new research techniques or trends or things that you see that you would like to have as in your arsenal, so to speak?
So I think what digital provides actually is a really incredible research opportunity because a lot of what consumers think and feel, they're now putting out there for us to listen to. And I think sometimes we call it, social listening. We have our agencies go do social listening before, but it really can become a part of your everyday, right? So as a marketer, what I like to do is I actually like to be in those channels and just listen to what consumers are talking about. Sometimes they're talking about your products or for us for allergies, but sometimes the insights actually aren't about allergies. They're about what they like to do out in the world because allergies stop that, right? So to me, like social media is actually an incredible listening tool, an incredible way to go do research. I think that one of the things we've done recently is really just have one-on-one interviews with our consumers, which is probably a little bit old school, right? But just go on and have a moderator we trust, go and talk to them about their lives. Because sometimes I think what we used to do is we used to be too focused on the product or the need state. But that's part of their more holistic life, right? So sometimes understanding their holistic life is sometimes more important than understanding the need state, especially when you spend a lot of time with them, right?
what are you looking for as you're listening to how they go about their daily life, or you're listening through social channels? What are you listening for?
I think in some ways we're listening for two things. We're listening to what truly makes them happy. And that maybe seems a little like basic, right? But like, what is it that really gives you energy? What is it that makes you excited to do the things you want to do? Chances are it's not like, if you're really into golf, chances are it's not really just about your golf swing, right? Or your score that day. It's about a lot more things. So there's probably something in what you just did or what you enjoy about work that's really fundamental to what makes you enjoy life. So sometimes we're really just listening for that. And then sometimes we're listening to the things that make you not so happy. Like, what is it that is really hard about your life? What is it that interferes with you being as happy as you want to be? So for us, sometimes that actually comes back to their health care and where they're not feeling well and how allergies interfere with them. And it's not sometimes how they would answer it. Like if I asked you how your allergies impact you, you might say, oh, they make my eyes itchy or they make me sneeze, sometimes in uncomfortable situations. But you probably wouldn't talk about how if you're at your kid's school play and you're sneezing, you're embarrassing your kid, right? And that is a fundamental, like that's powerful. And we're not going to go say to a consumer, like, you just sneeze to ruin your kid's life.
Right.
But like that to us is a real learning about how allergies impact you.
Right. And the emotional impact that it has.
Right. The emotional piece of it.
So healthcare marketing, it's a challenging landscape.
Yeah.
A lot of regulations. Any thoughts on, how to be successful as a healthcare marketer?
Yeah. So in healthcare, there are a lot of regulations for all the right reasons, right? We have to do right by our consumers. I think that what we found to be the best is that when we honestly understand the regulations at a level maybe you wouldn't necessarily think a marketer would do, right? So you understand the regulations not like a lawyer would, and you partner really, really tightly with your lawyers and your regulatory partners and your medical partners. So we have doctors and pharmacists that are on our teams to help us understand things. And then honestly, once we understand them, we try to live in them. And we try to say, these are all made for the right reasons. And they're going to make our consumers' lives and health better in the long run. So we work with them instead of trying to work against them.
So we've talked a lot about change and trends. What do you see changing about the organization? And it could be yours, but it could be marketing organizations in general. What do you see for the next 5-10 years?
Yeah. So I think, as much as we said digital is part of the mix, but it's not the idea, right? I think that digital is, though, much more of a skill set, and we call it competencies at J&J, but they're very much part of your marketing competencies now. So as we're, 5 years ago, it was a nice to have a marketer who had experience in digital. Now it's actually very much part of the expectation that that's part of the training you're going to get, as much it is to go on, it used to be, you have to be on a TV advertising shoot. Now digital is much more part of that. So you have to understand social, you have to manage part of the social campaigns or digital campaign. And that's given equal weight to TV in the organization. So I think that from a marketer's and an ABM's and brand manager perspective, that's been a change. I think one of the changes that we've seen, at least at Johnson & Johnson, but I'm sure it's probably everywhere, is that they're now digital marketing centers of excellence. So we rely on them to help us understand what the trends are, how to navigate them. And we talked about healthcare marketing. Actually, in social, healthcare marketing becomes really a bit challenging, right? Because we hear things that we used to not hear. And so we'll sometimes hear safety information that we really want to hear and we want to keep track of. And so we had to devise systems to be able to do that. And that used to be part of our job. So that's been a real change for us. And then we really just have truly digital marketers are part of our teams now to help make sure that the learnings on, say, a Zyrtec actually get translated onto the rest of the brand, so we can really use all the learnings together.
Right. We've talked a lot about digital and mix. How do you see the mix evolving? And obviously digital's growing, but do you ever see TV and those big drivers going away?
I think that's a really good question. We've done some experiments in the last year or so with trying to do digital only campaigns and moving TV away. And quite honestly, on some brands, they did well. And on some brands, they didn't. The mass awareness that TV brings is still a really important part of the toolkit for some brands that need the awareness drivers. So I think it's almost a brand by brand thing. And it matters on your total brand equity, matters probably on your competitive set and what other people are talking about. We have seen more of a focus on digital, but what I would also say is it's about what type of digital, right? So digital 5 years ago was mostly banner ads and banner ads are becoming less and less part of your mix. While at the same time, social a couple years ago was virtually free, right? So you needed the teams to manage everything. Now it's not free anymore. The new Facebook algorithms, how you go about it cost a lot more money than they used to. So how do you weight that in the mix? Like, what's the ROI on that now? And I don't know if we know that yet. I think that's one of the emerging questions that will come in the next couple months is how does Facebook pay out? How do some of the social media engines, as they become not so free anymore, work? I think the other thing that's interesting is that there's a perception often, particularly at more senior levels, that digital is really inexpensive. So compared to TV, that it's cheaper, it's more efficient. And that's not always true. Some of the best digital programs cost as much as a TV commercial do to make, right, to produce. Yeah. And then you still have to promote them, especially now, the promotion, you need more and more promotion in digital. So I think that's one of the most interesting things that will evolve over time is understanding of true costs.
Right. And you talked about ROI. I want to specifically get your perspective on, you're building a brand. Brand is like an asset.
Right.
It's got long-term, you hope, long-term value.
Yeah.
How do you balance the short-term need to drive volume and sales and the long-term brand building effort?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. And I think probably fundamentally the challenge of long-term equity and short-term sales or short-term, profit are, at the end of the day, one of the biggest things a marketer has to deal with, especially when they own the P&L, right? And I think it matters on the life stage of your brand. So on Zyrtec, it's a very young brand. It's only been on the market for 6 years. So building that equity, it's actually easier to see that the long-term investment is necessary. I also manage Benadryl, which is one of our oldest brands. Right. And so that one has an amazing brand equity and maybe, doesn't need as much everyday investment that Zyrtec does. So sometimes it's about really where they are in life stage. I think that it's also, this is where the data helps us. So we do marketing efficiency analysis, and we used to actually do them just on a short-term year-over-year basis. So this year we did our first more long-term one. So what has paid out for us over the last 5 or 6 years as we've built the Zyrtec brand. And it's been really fascinating to us because some of the programs that were newer, that were more different. Some of our PR program we did in 2011 actually had the best long-term ROI on it. At the time, it didn't look like it had a very good ROI. So I think that's a really important learning for us as marketers. And that was a very digital, it was in 2011. So it was one of the first big YouTube campaigns. So that's a really interesting new learning for us. I don't know what the conclusion is, but I know it's something we need to make sure we're careful about.
So I want to circle back.
Sure.
We talked about you being the only woman here today. Do you think being a woman marketer gives you an advantage or is there a difference?
Yeah, I think that's a really great question. I think as marketers, we bring ourselves to everything we do. We probably do it across everything, but particularly as marketers, because we're talking about consumer communication, right? Mm-hmm. So what we bring into the room, especially when we're listening to consumers, means a lot. I think that what makes me a better marketer is being a mom. And I mean that because I look and I understand when moms are talking and they're talking about life being hard, right? It's not always easy. And sometimes the balls that get dropped aren't the right ones. And that's really challenging. And I think for women in general, I'm fortunate, I have a great job. I have a wonderful husband, and there's not a lot of challenge in our life for raising children, but that's not true for most women. Most moms are single. A lot of moms don't really make enough money to make the ends meet. So trying to get great childcare for them on top of dealing with whatever else they're dealing with is really challenging. And so I think going in there and assuming life isn't that easy because you get it, like you were up half the night with your crying infant before you went to the groups, right? You come in at a very empathetic space. And I think that's what makes very good marketers, is having empathy. I think the other thing, and this is less about the consumer communication, it's more about the partnership across a team, particularly with an agency team, is when you're a mom, particularly a young mom, you learn that you're not perfect. And I think that sharing that with your agency from a client perspective really helps the bonds build. So I was talking about this with my agency partner who's here with me today, that because we're not perfect and we're open about it, which I think is partially being a mom, like that's how I learned that, makes us much better partners with our teams, because we're not necessarily expecting perfection. We're expecting perfection. We're expecting authenticity. And at the end of the day, the best marketing is when it's authentic. And so if you bring your authentic self, whether or not you're a man or a woman, a mom or a dad, to marketing, I think you're much better at it.
So stepping back from Zyrtec, Benadryl, Johnson & Johnson, the kids at home, if you had it to do all over again, what would you do?
Yeah.
Would you pick a different, not would you pick a different career, but what would you want to go pursue?
Yeah. So I'm lucky. I absolutely love my job and I love my husband and my kids. I think the thing that I would do over again is learn to be, we talked about like failure from a digital perspective, right? I think I would be more open to my own personal failures earlier and like not try to just get beyond them, but actually learn from them. Like we do with digital and everything else. It's been like a big learning in my life in the past couple of years, is that of course not everything's going to go perfect. So can you be okay with being a little more imperfect and learning a little bit more from those experiences?
That's a great message for young people coming up in their careers. I wish I had that advice myself personally.
Thank you.
I just want to say thank you for joining us. And
thank you for having me. I really
appreciate it. Such a great conversation.
Wonderful.